I never thought a single sentence could cut through a lifetime, but that night at our family dinner, it did. My sister leaned back in her chair smirking and told me I didn't deserve our family name. My mom agreed. My dad wouldn't even meet my eyes. And for a moment I felt the room tilt, like I was disappearing right in front of them. Then my grandpa rose, slow, steady, and said something that shattered her smile in an instant. Most people think the story ends there with his words. But the real truth, the part no one saw, came after. My name is Eliana, and for most of my life, I've learned to shrink myself just enough to keep the peace. It wasn't something anyone told me to do. It was something I picked up from the way my family's attention always tilted toward my sister, like a plant bending toward the closest light. She was the star, the favorite, the one who represented the family well. I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one who blended into the background while everyone else sparkled. At work, I'm coordinator, the kind of job where being organized and calm actually means something. People there appreciate me. They ask for my input. They trust me to make decisions. But in my parents' house, those same qualities somehow make me forgettable. I've stopped counting how many times my mom told me, "You're too sensitive." Right after praising my sister for speaking her mind, or how often my dad brushed off my small achievements, graduating early, getting promoted, like they were polite footnotes to my sister's louder, flashier milestones. Still, I kept trying. Not to impress them, but because something inside me still hoped they'd see me the way Grandpa does. He's always been different. He talks to me like I matter. He listens without interrupting. When I was little, he'd say things like, "A family name doesn't make you worthy. Your character does." I didn't fully understand it then. Now I think he was trying to prepare me for something I'd eventually have to face. The dinner we were invited to was supposed to be a holiday gathering, nothing dramatic. My mom messaged in the family group chat with a list of dishes and a cheerful everyone be on time. But the tone felt too rehearsed, too formal. My sister replied with a string of bragging updates about some award she'd gotten at work, something I knew would dominate the night. My dad sent his usual thumbs-up reaction. I stared at the screen for a while before replying that I'd be there. All week little things started stacking up. My sister dropping hints about future responsibilities in the family, my mom making comments about how some people weren't pulling their weight, cousins texting me asking if I'd heard the news about Grandpa wanting to name someone in charge of part of the family legacy. No one said it directly, but I could hear the assumption behind every sentence they thought be her. I tried to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter that I wouldn't let old patterns ruin another holiday. But on the drive to my parents' house, the sky looked heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I parked outside, sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel, and told myself just get through dinner. I had no idea that by the end of the night everything would break open. By the time the dinner day arrived, the tension had already been simmering for a week. Quiet needling moments that stacked themselves into something heavier than I wanted to admit. It started with a message from my sister, a casual "Can you bring something simple? We don't want the table to look uneven." She meant food, but the subtext wasn't subtle. I read it twice, then set my phone down without replying for a long minute. Eventually, I typed back a polite acknowledgement, even though the words stung more than they should have of. At work, my CO workers kept asking if I was excited for the holidays. I said yes, because it was easier than explaining that holidays in my family often meant navigating invisible tripwires. They complimented the small successes I'd had recently, a project I'd managed well, a supervisor's praise, and for a moment I felt grounded. But as soon as I stepped into my apartment, the confidence faded. It was as if the closer I got to that dinner, the smaller I felt. My sister didn't help. She called 2 days before, her voice bright and sharp, the way it gets when she's already shaping a narrative. She told me Mom wanted the table set a certain way, that Dad didn't want anyone bringing up stressful topics, and that Grandpa had been asking interesting questions about responsibility, leadership, and family values. She said it all so breezily that I almost missed the edge in her tone. An edge that sounded like she'd already decided she was the answer to whatever Grandpa was looking for. "You know he values tradition," she added casually. "Some people fit that better than others." She didn't have to say my name. I hung up feeling strangely hollow. Something was shifting, and everyone except me seemed to know what direction it was moving. The morning of the dinner, Mom sent a reminder about arrival time and dress code, something she'd never done before. Dad replied with a brief acknowledgement. My sister sent a selfie from the salon with a caption about looking the part tonight. I didn't reply. I just got dressed quietly, choosing a soft sweater and simple earrings, clothes that felt like myself rather than a performance. When I arrived at my parents' house, the driveway was already full. Through the windows, I could see silhouettes moving, relatives greeting each other, laughter rising, glasses clinking. It should have felt warm. Instead, I felt the weight of old memories pressing against my ribs. Inside, the small interactions began immediately. My aunt hugged me and said I looked sweet. My sister swept in behind me, kissed her on the cheek, and was called beautiful. My mom fussed over the food my sister brought, then turned to mine with a polite but thin smile. Dad walked past me on his way to the living room, giving me a quick pat on the shoulder without stopping. By the time we all sat at the table, the air felt tight. My sister started talking about her latest accomplishment, leaning back in her chair, basking in the attention. Every time I opened my mouth to contribute something small, she cut me off smoothly, confidently, as if she was doing everyone a favor. It was subtle at first, then it wasn't. Somewhere between the clinking glasses and the second round of toasts, a feeling settled into my chest, heavy, certain, impossible to ignore. Something was coming, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. The moment I sat down at the table, I felt it. The shift. Conversations dimmed, glances sharpened, and the kind of brittle politeness that only appears when people are waiting for something to happen settled over the room. Candlelight flickered against the holiday decorations, throwing soft shadows across the faces around me. It all looked warm, almost picturesque, but underneath it was the hum of tension I'd grown up recognizing. Dinner began innocently enough. My cousins chatted about work and travel, my uncles debated football, my aunts passed dishes back and forth, but every time I tried to join in, my sister slid her voice right over mine. She didn't even try to hide it. She'd tilt her head, smile sweetly, and speak louder, effortlessly, redirecting attention back to herself. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I tried again, asked a question, added a small comment. She cut in so smoothly, even I almost believed she hadn't meant to, but her eyes flicked to mine with that familiar spark, the one that said she knew exactly what she was doing. Mom was no help. She was glowing, practically bursting with pride over my sister's latest achievement. She's always been such a natural leader, she announced to the table, lifting her glass. Some people are just born to carry the family forward. Her gaze slid past me like I wasn't even sitting there. Dad didn't say much. He just kept adjusting his silverware, taking sips of water, pretending not to notice the growing imbalance, pretending he didn't hear the way my sister dismissed me with every opportunity. His silence felt louder than any words. As the meal went on, the energy shifted from subtle to sharp. My sister relaxed further in her chair, elbow resting on the back, one ankle crossed over the other. She was glowing with self-satisfaction, almost impatient, as if she was waiting for her moment to strike. She kept bringing up conversations about legacy, responsibility, representing the family well. Each mention landed like a breadcrumb leading toward something I didn't want to follow. Grandpa sat quietly near the end of the table, listening more than speaking, observing each interaction with eyes that missed nothing. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't adding small comments. He was studying, and I could feel it. My sister could too. It made her louder, brighter, more insistent, desperate to be seen. Then came the moment that signaled the start of the unraveling. My aunt asked me about work, genuinely curious. For once, the table actually went quiet enough for me to answer. I spoke 2 sentences, maybe 3, before my sister let out a sudden laugh, leaned back, and swept the attention away with a dramatic retelling of some minor success she'd had the week before. It was so blatant, the entire table paused. My aunt blinked. My uncle frowned. Cousins exchanged glances. My sister didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. She was already in full performance mode, spinning a story commanding the room. And something inside me loosened. Not snapped, not shattered, just loosened. Like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long finally giving way. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even hurt. I was just tired, bone-deep tired. So, I chose silence. Not the shrinking kind, not the defeated kind, just a quiet, steady silence that let me see everything clearly. Every smirk, every nod, every time someone looked away instead of speaking up. Then as dessert plates were being cleared and new drinks being poured, I saw it. The shift in my sister's posture. She straightened, then leaned back intentionally, eyes glittering. A signal, a setup. She'd found her moment and the room braced for it, even if they didn't know why. The warmth in the dining room felt wrong, thick, heavy, like it was clinging to my skin. Candlelight flickered across the long table, catching on silverware and the glossy glaze of holiday dishes. Laughter still floated somewhere near the far end, but it felt distant from where I sat. Everything around me had that eerie stillness right before a storm breaks. My sister dropped her fork with a soft clink, stretching her arms in a slow, deliberate motion. She leaned back in her chair with the confidence of someone who believed the moment belonged to her. Her smile was wide, bright, and painfully rehearsed, the kind she used when she wanted attention to linger on her. Then she looked at me. Her gaze was sharp beneath the performance, slicing through the space between us. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just waited steady, unwilling to shrink into the shadow she always expected me to occupy. She tapped her heel lightly against the hardwood floor. "You know," she began loudly enough to silence the chatter nearby, "not everyone sitting here deserves our family name." The room quieted instantly. Forks paused. Glasses froze midair. Her smile sharpened. "Some people," she continued, "just exist in this family without contributing anything meaningful. They hide behind being quiet, hoping that makes them special." Her eyes glinted. "Really, it just makes them forgettable." A hum filled my ears, not sound but pressure, the kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. Mom nodded quickly, firmly, as if she had been waiting for someone to say it aloud. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her nod was enough. Dad didn't say a word. Instead, he stared hard at the tablecloth, thumbs rubbing the folded edge of his napkin. That tiny movement hit me harder than the words. Silence wasn't neutral. It was abandonment. My sister kept smiling, glowing even. "I'm just telling the truth, Ellie." The nickname landed like a slap. "You're not worthy of our name." It should have shattered me, but instead something inside me strangely quieted. My breath didn't hitch. My eyes didn't burn. I just stilled. Like the blow had struck somewhere already numb from years of smaller ones. Relatives shifted uncomfortably. One aunt whispered to another. A cousin looked at me with something like apology, but none of them said anything. And then everything shifted. It's subtle, but unmistakable. All attention pulled toward the opposite end of the table. Grandpa. He hadn't spoken all night, had barely moved, barely reacted. He sat with a calm so deep it was almost unsettling. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd let it go. Maybe he'd decided to stay quiet to avoid disrupting the holiday. But then he lifted his glass, just a few inches, just enough for everyone to notice. He looked into the liquid for a long second, then set the glass down with a slow, deliberate tap. The sound echoed. He placed his hands on the table and stood up, not quickly, not dramatically, but with a steady weight that pulled the room's silence taut. My sister's smile brightened. She straightened in her seat, clearly expecting praise or agreement. She'd always believed Grandpa admired her boldness. He looked at me first. His eyes softened just barely, but the softness was enough to crack something tight in my chest. Then he turned to her. "You think she isn't worthy of our name?" he asked. My sister blinked, caught off guard, but recovering fast. "I'm just being honest. We all know she hasn't exactly." He raised one hand, barely a gesture, but it silenced her instantly. The next words came quiet, but they landed with the force of a hammer. "Then neither do you." Her smile fell so fast it was almost visible, like watching a mask crack and drop to the floor. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened and all the color drained from her face. Gasps rippled around the table. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Dad closed his eyes, shoulders stiffening. Grandpa didn't sit down. He kept his gaze fixed on my sister, unflinching. "For months," he said, "I've been watching, listening, trying to understand who should guide this family's legacy when I'm gone." A heavy silence followed. Everyone knew what legacy implied, but no one dared interrupt. He continued, voice steady, calm, devastating. "And tonight you showed me everything I needed to know." My sister shook her head, barely audible. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said. "You've mistaken arrogance for strength, entitlement for leadership, cruelty for confidence." Her breath caught. She blinked rapidly as if fighting tears she refused to let fall. Mom finally found her voice. "Dad," she didn't mean he cut her off with a gentle firmness. "But she did, and you nodded." And he gestured toward Dad, looked away. Dad wilted into his chair. Grandpa turned back to me. "Eliana," he said, "you have carried yourself with grace in a family that has not always shown you the same. You listen, you steady yourself, you stand on character. That is what makes someone worthy of a name, not volume, not vanity." My throat tightened, but not with pain, with something else, something like being seen for the first time. My sister whispered, "This isn't fair." But the words hovered weakly, lacking the conviction they once carried. Grandpa looked at her one last time. "Fairness," he said softly, "is finally catching up." He sat down, and the room, already silent, fell into a deeper stillness, one that felt like the end of a storm no one had realized they'd been trapped in. Across the table, my sister's eyes shimmered with the dawning understanding that something had shifted permanently, irrevocably. Her whole body seemed smaller now, curled inward, no longer basking in the power she thought she owned. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible at that table. I felt undeniable. When the dinner finally ended, People moved quietly as if afraid any sudden sound might shatter what was left of the night. My sister slipped away down the hallway, shoulder trembling. No trace of the confidence she'd worn all evening. My mom followed her, whispering frantically. My dad lingered by the sink, pretending to rinse a plate he'd already washed. Grandpa touched my arm gently. "Come with me," he said. We stepped outside into the cool night air. The backyard was dim, lit only by a strand of old holiday lights my dad never bothered to take down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was softer than the one inside, less painful, more grounding. I meant every word he said. "Finally, I've watched you carry yourself with dignity your whole life, even when they didn't see it, especially then." I swallowed hard. "I always wondered if you noticed." "I noticed," he said. "And tonight only confirmed what I already knew. You're the one I trust with what comes next. The legacy, the decisions, the responsibility. You've earned all of it. It wasn't the inheritance itself that hit me. It was the recognition, the one thing I'd quietly hoped for since childhood." Through the window, I saw my sister's silhouette, her head bowed, her smile gone. I knew I'd remember that moment forever. "Ready to go inside?" Grandpa asked. For the first time that night, I nodded without hesitation. I drove home that night with the kind of quiet I'd never felt before. Not empty, not sad, just settled. For years, I thought I had to earn a place in my own family by being small, careful, agreeable. But standing there, hearing Grandpa say those words, I finally understood something simple and freeing. Worthiness isn't granted by a last name. It's revealed by how you live. I don't know what will happen between us moving forward. Families don't break and mend in a single evening, but I do know this. I walked out of that house carrying my name differently. If you've ever felt unseen in your own family, tell me your story in the comments. And subscribe if you want more stories like this.